Welcome to The Explainer. In this explainer, we're digging into the methods of three of the 20th century's most brutal, most notorious authoritarian rulers. That is the big question, isn't it? How does absolute power corrupt so completely? Well, that's what we're tackling today. We're going to explore the chillingly common patterns that actually link these regimes of terror, even when they're separated by huge distances and completely different ideologies. So we're going to break down exactly how Joseph Stalin, Mao Zedong, and King Leopold II grabbed that control. And then, of course, the terrifying, devastating consequences for millions upon millions of people. All right, first things first. How did these guys even get into positions of such unchecked authority? You might think there's one single playbook for this, but as we're about to see, their paths to total control were actually surprisingly different. I mean, look at this. Each one took a totally different route, but they all ended up in the exact same place: absolute power. You have Stalin, the ultimate political insider, a master of manipulation. Then there's Mao, the revolutionary general who literally won his power on the battlefield. And then there's Leopold, a cunning businessman king who used economic deception on a scale the world had never seen. Okay, let's talk about Leopold's deception because it's just incredible. He actually used the cover of humanitarianism to get his hands on a personal colony, get this, 80 times the size of his own country, Belgium. He literally convinced the world he was there to end slavery, all while his agents were signing these phony treaties with local chiefs who had no idea they were trading away their land for trinkets and a few bags of salt. Now, Stalin's story, it's a masterclass in bureaucratic cunning. He didn't charge in and seize power in some violent coup. No. He was much smarter than that. He methodically built his power from the inside out. As general secretary, he controlled all the party appointments, so he just stacked the entire government with his own guys. By the time his biggest rival, Trotsky, even realized what was going on, it was too late. He was powerless and eventually forced into exile. Just brilliant in a terrifying way. Okay, so once they're in power, the game changes. Now it's all about keeping that power. And to do that, each of these dictators develops their own unique and brutal set of tools to enforce their will and crush anyone who dared to disagree. To maintain his iron grip, Stalin perfected this truly terrifying instrument of state control, the Gulag. And we have to be clear, this wasn't just a prison system. It was a vast, sprawling network of forced labor camps, deliberately placed in the frozen wastelands of Siberia. It was designed for one purpose: to break not just bodies, but human spirits. And the sheer scale of it, it's just almost impossible to wrap your head around. 20 million people. We're talking political opponents, intellectuals, artists, even ordinary farmers who just resisted his policies. All of them were funneled into this archipelago of terror. Meanwhile, in the Congo, Leopold's insatiable greed for rubber profits created a system that earned a terrifying nickname, Red Rubber, named for the blood that was shed to get it. This was just pure, brutal exploitation, all disguised as a legitimate commercial enterprise. He had his own private army, the Force Publique, and they used just unimaginable cruelty to terrorize the population into working. Here's how it worked. If a village didn't meet its impossible rubber quota, the army would take the women and children hostage. And if that didn't work, well, that often meant death. And just to prove they hadn't wasted expensive European bullets on, say, hunting animals, soldiers were ordered to bring back the severed right hand of every single person they killed. And this quote, it just says it all, doesn't it? It exposes the cold, sickening calculation behind all this horror. He wasn't seeing human beings. He was seeing a resource. He was just seeing hands. Hands to extract rubber for his profit. So if Leopold's terror was driven by pure personal greed, Mao's was driven by something else, radical ideology. He had this vision of transforming China from a farming society into an industrial communist paradise, and he wanted to do it overnight. His grand plan was called the Great Leap Forward. And let me tell you, it turned out to be a leap straight into an absolute catastrophe. I mean, the plan was just a sequence of one catastrophic decision after another. First, private farming was completely abolished. Then farmers were ordered to produce steel in these little backyard furnaces, which of course just produced useless, low-quality metal. And then, you can't make this stuff up, he launched a campaign to kill all the sparrows, which he called pests. Well, what happened? An explosion of the insects that sparrows used to eat, which then destroyed the crops. It was a complete and utter disaster from start to finish. So you might be wondering, how on earth do you enforce policies that are so obviously disastrous? Well, you do it with absolute ideological control. Mao literally weaponized his own words. His book, Quotations from Chairman Mao, you probably know it as the Little Red Book. It became mandatory. Every single citizen had to have one. It was the ultimate tool to enforce conformity and build this fanatical cult of personality around the very man whose policies were causing millions to starve. So what does all of this add up to? The camps, the quotas, the ideological brainwashing, it all leads to one single unavoidable outcome, a horrific, almost incomprehensible cost in human lives. Under Leopold's rule, the population of the Congo was cut in half. Half. Murder, starvation, disease. That's 10 million lives, extinguished for profit. And Stalin, his paranoia, his brutal policies of collectivization and political purges, they resulted in the deaths of at least, and this is a conservative estimate, at least 20 million of his own people. And then there's Mao. His Great Leap Forward created the single largest famine in all of human history. It killed an absolutely astonishing 45 million people in just 4 years. And all the while, his officials were faking harvest reports, and he was actually exporting grain to the rest of the world just to save face. So, how did these reigns of terror finally come to an end? And what kind of mark did they leave on the world? Well, their ends were just as different as their beginnings, really. Leopold was eventually forced to give up the Congo because of a huge international outcry. Public pressure actually worked. Stalin's reign of terror only ended when he died of a stroke, which finally allowed his successors to start a process of, well, de-Stalinization. But Mao, he remained in power right up until his death, and he even launched another brutal campaign, the Cultural Revolution, after the catastrophic failure of the Great Leap Forward. So, what's the common thread here? What's the big takeaway? Well, whether it was Stalin's paranoid ideology, Leopold's bottomless greed, or Mao's radical social engineering, the path to tyranny was paved with the exact same material, the complete dehumanization of millions of people, turning them from citizens with lives and families into mere obstacles or resources to be exploited. And all of this history, well, it forces us to ask a really difficult question, one that is still critically relevant today. What are the warning signs we need to look out for? What patterns can we recognize? And what lessons from this past must we absolutely never, ever forget?